The desert night had no mercy. The stars hung like sharp pieces of glass in the sky, so black it swallowed sound. Somewhere in that vast emptiness, a young Apache woman crawled, her hands raw and bleeding, her breath thin as smoke. Her name was Naeli. Once, she had been fierce, her spirit as unbroken as the wild horses that roamed the plains. But now, her tribe had left her behind, cast out for reasons that burned deeper than any wound. Her body was streaked with blood, dust, and shame. The cuts across her arms were from jagged rocks, but the deeper wounds came from betrayal. She had fought against a raiding party that had threatened children in her camp. Instead of gratitude, she was accused of disobedience, of failing to follow the strict orders of the elders. They tied her hands, dragged her far into the Badlands, and left her with nothing. No food, no water, not even a knife to defend herself. "Let the desert claim you," they had said. Naeli had been crawling for hours. Each breath tasted of sand. The moon was sinking when she saw a flicker of movement far off, a shape that didn't belong to the desert's stillness. She froze. Her dark eyes narrowed. At first, she thought it was a mirage. A horse. No, 2 horses. The rider was a tall man with shoulders like carved stone. His hat was pulled low, but his jaw caught the moonlight, strong and unyielding. His name was Colt Weston, though no one in these lands said his name without some kind of story behind it. Some called him a ghost of the frontier, a man who had lost everything, his family, his home, and his faith in the world. Colt had been riding alone for weeks, crossing the desert to outrun his own memories. He had seen blood and death more times than he cared to remember, and he had made a promise never to interfere in anyone's battles again. But when he spotted Naeli, broken and half buried in the sand, something inside him shifted. He dismounted in one smooth motion. "Damn," he muttered under his breath, crouching down beside her. "What happened to you?" Naeli's lips parted, but no sound came out. Her throat was too dry. She looked up at him with defiance that cut straight through her weakness. Even now, on the edge of death, her gaze was sharp, as if daring him not to pity her. Colt pulled a canteen from his saddle and pressed it to her lips. "Easy," he said softly, his voice low and rough like gravel. "Drink slow or you'll choke." The water burned down her throat, but it brought her back from the edge. She coughed, shaking violently, but Colt's hands were steady as he helped her sit up. "You're Apache," he observed, scanning her tattered clothes. He didn't say it like an insult, just a fact. "What the hell are you doing out here alone?" She tried to speak again. "Left behind," she rasped. Colt frowned. He wasn't sure what she meant, but he could see enough to know she wouldn't last another hour in the cold desert night. Without another word, he lifted her in his arms. She was light as a bird, but her muscles were taut with the kind of strength born from survival. "Don't fight me," he said, feeling her tense. "I'm not here to hurt you." He carried her to his horse, wrapping his worn coat around her shoulders. The scent of leather and smoke surrounded her. She wanted to resist, to tell him she didn't need saving, but the truth was written in her trembling limbs. Colt's campfire burned low by the time she woke again. She was lying on a bedroll, the night air cold against her skin. The cowboy sat a few feet away, his rifle resting across his knees, watching the darkness like it might lunge at them. She pushed herself up slowly, wincing at the pain in her body. He turned, his eyes meeting hers. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. "You got a name?" Colt asked. "Naeli," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Well, Naeli, you're lucky I came through here when I did. Another hour and the desert would have taken you." She narrowed her eyes. "Why, help me?" Colt's jaw tightened. He didn't have an easy answer. Maybe it was because he saw something in her that reminded him of himself, a fighter abandoned by the world. Maybe it was just because he was tired of watching people die. "Because I don't leave people die in the dirt," he said finally, "even if they think they don't need saving." Naeli looked at him for a long time, her expression unreadable. "My tribe, they don't want me," she said softly. "I'm nothing now." "Then maybe it's time to start over," Colt replied, his voice quiet but firm. The days that followed were filled with silence. Colt led his horse through the rocky trails, while Naomi rode behind him, wrapped in a blanket. She said little, but her sharp gaze missed nothing. The way his hand never strayed far from his revolver, the way he scanned the horizon like a man who expected trouble. One evening, as they made camp near a canyon, Naomi finally spoke. You carry sadness, she said, her words careful, as if testing them. Colt froze, his knife halfway through cutting strips of jerky. He looked up, his eyes shadowed by firelight. You're not wrong, he admitted. Lost my family a long time ago. The world been quiet ever since. Naomi studied him. You saved me. Maybe you still have a good heart. He gave a bitter laugh. Good heart? I'm just a man trying to get through one more day without losing my soul. Something softened in her eyes. You won't lose it, she said quietly. But the desert wasn't done testing them. 2 days later, riders appeared on the horizon, armed men, likely scouts from a nearby outlaw gang. Colt saw them first. He pushed Naomi behind a cluster of rocks. Stay low, he whispered. What will you do? She asked, her voice steady. What I have to, he said grimly. The fight came fast. Colt's revolver roared in the silence, each shot precise. He moved like a shadow, protecting Naomi with every breath. But when one of the outlaws lunged toward her, it was Naomi who acted. She grabbed a fallen knife and struck, her movement swift and deadly. When it was over, Colt looked at her with something new in his eyes, respect and maybe something deeper. You're a warrior, he said softly. She met his gaze. Maybe I still am. That night, as a fire crackled between them, something unspoken hung in the air. Colt sat close enough that she could feel the heat of his body. Her fingers brushed his as he handed her a tin cup of water, and neither of them pulled away. You don't have to stay with me, he said quietly. Once you're strong enough, you can go where you want. Naomi looked at him, her dark eyes reflecting the firelight. Where would I go? My past is gone. But with you, I feel alive again. Colt's breath caught. For years, he had been a man made of stone. But this woman, this fierce, broken warrior, was carving cracks into him. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in years, he wanted to find out. And as the desert wind whispered through the night, Colt Weston knew one thing with absolute certainty. Saving Naomi hadn't just rescued her life. It had saved something in him, too. The desert sunrise bled gold over the canyon walls, its light spilling across Colt Weston's camp like fire creeping over dry brush. Naomi stood at the edge of the camp, her bare feet pressing into the cold sand as she watched the sky burn. Every morning felt like another chance at life, something she never expected to have again after her tribe abandoned her. Colt was already awake, his hat tilted low as he cleaned his rifle with the same slow, deliberate care he gave every task. He looked up when she glanced at him, his sharp blue eyes softening just slightly. Didn't sleep much, did you? He asked. I dreamed, she replied, her voice calm but distant. I saw my people. I saw their faces when they left me. I heard them say I was not one of them anymore. Colt tightened the leather strap on his rifle. Dreams have a way of cutting deeper than a knife. But they're just dreams. Out here, it's only the two of us that matter. She turned toward him, her long dark hair loose around her shoulders. You speak like a man who trusts no one. I trust my horse, he said with a smirk. And I'm learning to trust you. Something flickered in her gaze, surprise, maybe even gratitude. But before she could respond, Colt's expression hardened. His hand shot to his revolver as he tilted his head toward the horizon. Riders, he said flatly. 3 of them, maybe 4, and they're coming fast. Naomi followed his gaze, her heart pounding. In the distance, black specks grew larger, kicking up dust as they rode hard toward the canyon. Your tribe? Colt asked, his jaw tight. She shook her head. No, they would not come for me. This is someone else. Outlaws, Colt muttered, could be the same gang we tangled with 2 days ago. He grabbed his saddlebag and tossed her a small revolver. You know how to use one? She looked at it, then at him, her lips curling in a defiant smile. I don't need a gun to fight, but I will use it if I must. The riders closed in, their shouts carrying across the canyon. Colt didn't wait for them to get closer. "We move," he said sharply, pulling her toward the horses. They rode hard to the canyon, the sound of hooves echoing against the stone walls. The sun climbed higher, turning the rocks into blazing mirrors. Colt's mind worked fast. There was no outrunning a gang with fresh horses forever. They needed a plan. By midday, they found shelter in a narrow ravine. Colt tied the horses under an overhang and crouched beside Naeli, his face drawn tight with focus. "They'll track us here," he said. "We need to be ready when they do." Naeli's dark eyes held his. "Why do they chase us? Is it me, or is it you they want?" "Probably both," Colt admitted. "Men like that don't need a reason. They see something they want, money, revenge, blood, and they take it." She studied him for a moment. "You carry anger. You fought men like this before." "Yeah," he said, his voice low, "and I've buried more than a few." The outlaws came just before sunset. 5 of them this time, rifles glinting in the dying light. Colt positioned himself on a high ridge, rifle steady against his shoulder. Naeli crouched beside him, her breathing slow, controlled. "Stay behind me," he said. "No," she whispered fiercely. "I fight with you." Before he could argue, a shot rang out, whistling past him and shattering stone. Colt fired back, hitting one rider clean in the chest. The canyon erupted in chaos, shouts, gunfire, and the thunder of hooves. Naeli moved like the wind, firing the revolver with deadly precision. Colt spared a glance at her. Her face was lit by firelight and fury, and in that moment, she looked every inch the warrior she claimed to be. 2 men fell, their bodies tumbling from their horses. The last outlaw tried to retreat, but Colt's bullet found him before he could escape. The canyon fell silent, the smell of gunpowder heavy in the air. After the fight, Colt sank to one knee, reloading his rifle with shaking hands. Naeli knelt beside him, her hand brushing his arm. "You're bleeding," she said softly, pointing to a deep gash on his shoulder. "It's nothing," he muttered, but his voice was hoarse. She tore a strip of cloth from her sleeve and pressed it against the wound. "You saved me again," she said. "Why?" Colt looked at her, his eyes dark and unreadable. "Because I couldn't stand losing someone else." Their faces were close, the tension between them humming like a drawn bowstring. Naeli's breath trembled. "You don't have to carry my fight," she whispered. "But I want to stay with you. Not because you saved me, because you see me when no one else does." Colt swallowed hard. His fingers brushed her cheek, rough and hesitant. "You make me want to live again," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. That night, the fire burned low, casting shadows on their faces. Colt sat close, his arm still bandaged from the fight, while Naeli rested her head lightly against his shoulder. The silence between them was no longer heavy. It was warm, alive. But deep down, Colt knew their battles weren't over. Somewhere out there, more men would come, maybe her tribe, maybe the rest of the gang. And when they did, he'd stand with her, no matter the cost. For the first time in years, Colt Weston wasn't just a lone cowboy riding through an empty land. He had someone beside him, someone worth fighting and living for.